So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Carmen Milanes. It's my pleasure to introduce her. She's the chief of OEHHA's Climate Indicators and Site Assessment section, and is the manager and conceptualizer in chief of the Climate Change Indicators activity, and that includes this workshop and our series of indicator reports with its first edition in 2009. So Carmen has a real passion for collaboration, and of course that's essential given the complexity and multifaceted nature of the work to identify and track retrospectively the impacts of climate change in California. It involves pulling together teams of experts to identify the critical science, to do the work, to reach consensus, to review the work, to come to closure, all with scientists' very busy schedules, indicator by indicator, and all of this Carmen and her team do beautifully. So to ground the upcoming discussions exploring climate change impacts in California and how we might track those impacts, Carmen is going to present an overview of the report series and work. Carmen.
Thank you, Lauren. Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yes, we see you, Carmen, and we see your screen.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having a little blip there.
Okay. Yeah. Hi.
Okay, thank you again, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to take a few minutes to present an overview of the Indicators of Climate Change in California report, which OEHHA prepares on behalf of Cal EPA.
Water for the dishes.
In 2007, OEHHA was tasked by the Cal EPA Office of the Secretary to develop climate change indicators for tracking what's happening with climate change in California. This happened at the heels of the passage of AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006. For purposes of the report, these indicators are metrics that are based on observational and monitoring data. Collectively, they serve as evidence of how California's climate is changing and how these changes are affecting the state's environment and its people, providing context for climate action. As Dr. Santer had mentioned, climate science involves many, many disciplines beyond OEHHA's core technical expertise. To make this report possible, we have to rely on collaborations with researchers and staff in other state agencies, federal government, and academic and research institutions. The indicator report tells California's climate change story, beginning with the human-influenced climate change drivers, emissions of heat-trapping greenhouse gas emissions, their concentrations in the environment, and as about 30% of emitted carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean, we have indicators also tracking ocean acidification. The story continues by tracking California's changing climate. We present indicators of annual average air temperatures across the state and some temperature-based metrics such as the frequency and magnitude of extreme heat events, heating and cooling degree days, which reflect energy demand, winter chill, which is an important period of cold temperatures needed by fruit and nut trees for dormancy. And then in addition, we have indicators for precipitation patterns and drought. These warming conditions and changing precipitation patterns affect California's physical systems. These are reflected in the water content of snowpacks, spring runoff from the Sierra Nevada, shrinking glaciers, temperatures of lake and ocean waters, dissolved oxygen concentrations in ocean waters, and sea level rise. And finally, to wrap up the climate change story, impacts on biological systems are presented. Humans are among those biological systems, as was mentioned by Chairman Lopez. We're not above the rest of the plants and animal species in the planet. For human health indicators, we track heat-related illnesses and deaths and vector-borne diseases. Impacts on vegetation describe how California's forests and woodlands have been changing since the 1930s. The densification of our subalpine forests, changes in the shifts of certain vegetation species, certain species such as the ponderosa pine, changes in the maturation time of fruits and nuts, forestry mortality, and of course, annual acreage burned by wildfires. Wildlife impacts
Carmen, this is a rate. I'm sorry to just stop you for a minute. You're in a presenter mode, so if you can update your slide view so we can see your slides better.
I'm sorry. I'll just do a new share.
We want to make sure that we can see it all. There we go.
That better? Sorry, I didn't realize I was looking at the wrong screen. It's a two-screen problem. My apologies. Finally, changes in wildlife are reflected in changing patterns of the timing of life cycle events, such as migratory bird arrivals, shifts in habitat ranges of small mammals and bird species in natural areas, as well as changing bird wintering ranges. This little image on the slide is a nudibranch sea slug species, and we present observational data showing its northward migration up the California coast. We also have indicators tracking population abundance of species such as the Sacramento fall run Chinook salmon. And very quickly, the 2018 report presents 36 indicators. They're all listed here in very small print. The elements on the left side of the slide are what we present for each of the indicators in the report. And to provide an example, I'd like to walk you through the drought indicator. An image of the page is shown here. And even without the benefit of zooming in on the details of the graph, the metric presented here is a commonly used drought metric, the Palmer Drought Severity Index. The blue bars represent wet years, the red bars represent dry years. As you can see, California is becoming increasingly dry. We had the most extreme drought on record between 2012 and 2016. And more recent years tend to be more dry, as measured in this indicator. We have a section in the indicator report that begins to talk about connections. Why is the indicator important? This is the so what discussion that we refer to amongst ourselves. For drought, we have at least 3 other indicators in the report that are linked to what we're seeing: warming air temperatures, precipitation patterns, and snow water content. During the severe drought of 2012 to 2016, we saw record high temperatures, the 4 consecutive driest year on record, and the lowest recorded snowpack in the Sierra Nevada. Why it matters. This is a selection of the consequences of drought that are familiar to everyone. Examples include drinking water shortages, which are particularly burdensome to California's rural communities, The recent drought severely impacted California agriculture. Orchards and vineyards were abandoned. Over 500,000 acres of irrigated land were fallowed, leading to lost agricultural jobs and revenue. Groundwater levels are impacted during drought because of increased reliance on groundwater. Hydroelectricity generation is impacted, and finally, ecosystems are affected. Freshwater habitat becomes degraded. Wildlife refuges, particularly for migratory birds, were impacted, and we see vegetative stresses reflected in tree mortality. So what we found over the past 3 editions of the climate change report is that a lot of the useful information discussed in the factors affecting the indicator and the so what, why is the indicator important, tend to get overlooked, yet they provide really useful information for guiding decisions and planning and actions. And what we wanted to do in this workshop is to bring those connections to the surface. We are really honored and thrilled to have the collection of speakers and presenters joining us over the next 2 days to explore the latest scientific findings on the interconnected nature of climate change. The goals of our workshop are to come up with a collective better understanding of how these interactions create risks that are previously unrecognized or magnify known risks. Information collected from this workshop will be used in the next edition of the indicator report due out in October 2021. And we do hope that through the discussions over the next 2 days and through the input on the Slack workspace, we get some ideas on significant climate change related issues that we should be tracking using indicators. One measure of success of this workshop would be the extent to which we facilitate connections being made among the workshop participants. And so we're hoping that people connect, people across different areas of discipline, people across geographies, people across jurisdictions and areas of responsibility can find ways to leverage each other's efforts, both to advance the science as well as to formulate solutions to address the issues relating to climate change. So we hope that you will engage with us and continue the conversations on Slack. That workspace will be available until February 1st of 2021. We will be using information on the Slack workspace to inform our update of the report. One important goal that we have for the 2021 report is to incorporate tribal perspectives on how California's tribes have been impacted by climate change. We recognize that that is a huge gap in previous editions of the report. And finally, this long list of individuals are folks who we owe a debt of gratitude to. We had over 80 contributors to the 2018 report. We're pleased that many of them are joining us as moderators and panelists. I'm also happy to note that many of them have joined the Zoom webinar as participants, and we hope to continue collaborating with our existing collaborators and form new collaborations among those of you who are tuned into the webcast. Also, a shout out to OEHHA's Climate Change Indicator team, pictured here, and no, the governor is not part of our team. And I also would like to acknowledge the fact that we have at least a couple of retirees who have been involved in prior indicator work joining us on the webinar. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your thoughts, ideas, and input over the next 2 days.